Well, hello, I'm Roger Lefebvre from Live Pulse News, and I have David Pidcock with me, who's returned as a guest for us. And today we're going to talk about the situation in the Middle East and what's prompted all these wars and uprisings. So if you can give us a few thoughts, David, on what's going on out there.
Well, as a convert to Islam, or a revert to Islam, having discussed what we discussed earlier about the issue of debt and interest, once I recognised that after Vatican II and how the scriptures have been altered and the Lord's Prayer and things like that, I became interested in finding, I said literally, after being defrauded by NatWest or NatWorst, whichever way you want, Bank of Canada, and I was driving through Sheffield. I bought a shipyard in Scotland, Berkeley Curl, dry dock, and that's been my business. It's been involved in building equipment, rebuilding equipment, rolling mills, etc., etc. And but I got to the point of realising that the banks had destroyed one of the best companies in Sheffield, Millspore and Ashlow Steel and Engineering, which I was a director of the sister company, the machinery company, and so I said, God, there's got to be a better way. And more or less, within 24 hours, I was invited to go to Saudi Arabia. Now, that was completely not in my mind. But when I realized that the Quran is the only book that they haven't been able to alter, and it's the prohibition of interest, usury, is absolutely nailed down. And as much as they try to get round it, as the Jews and the Christians got round these things, the scripture is still there for all those who wish to observe it.
Right.
So it was really from that standpoint. And then, of course, I discovered about the falsification of scripture, particularly the antipathy towards Arabs comes from Genesis 16:12, which refers to Ishmael as a wild donkey of a man, etc.
Right.
But when Mr. Ebert, who we've met,
Yes.
who is fluent in Aramaic and Hebrew, I discussed this with him, and he confirmed what I'd been told, that what we have translated, like the Lord's Prayer, has been falsified. Genesis 16:12, in all the translations, whether it's from the whichever group it is, you know, the Baptists or anyone else, the Jehovah's Witnesses, it says Yado Bakol Viad Kol Bo, relating to Ishmael, that he's a wild ass of a man, a wild donkey of a man.
Right.
His hand is against everyone, and all hands are against him. And Mr. Evans says, no, it doesn't say that. He said he is indomitable. His hand is in all hands, and all hands are in his. Now, does that not change the whole perception of the Arabs and etc.? But that poison has been there for thousands of years to discredit the Arabs and the prophet mentioned in Deuteronomy, who will be from amongst the brethren of the Arabs, who were not Israelites because they were still in Egypt.
Yep.
They were Arabs from the Ishmaelite tribes or the Midianites. So his wife Zipporah is an Arab. His sons Gershom and Eliezer are half Arab, half Ishmaelite, half Israelite. And the prophecy in Deuteronomy 18 about a prophet coming after them from amongst their brethren was the Arabs' brethren. And so when Muhammad came, everybody else was poisoned against them, except a few who did understand the scripture. So the beginning of the turmoil in the Middle East begins with falsification of scripture, as we've seen with the courts and the laws. It's
right.
all about falsifying the accounts. So that brings us up all through the Crusades and everything. This antipathy is this poison that the Arabs and the Ishmaelites are the enemy, and yet when you actually analyze it, Islam, Salima, is the religion of Abraham. Same religion, same all the way through, no difference at all. And so the point being that the Christians, of course, when the Prophet Muhammad, when Jesus came, he was rejected by the Jews. and for that reason they were expelled from Palestine, Al-Quds. When the prophet mentioned in Deuteronomy 18:18, the prophet will, and the words will be put in his mouth. The Christians didn't accept it, and apart some of the Jews did accept him, but others didn't. But if we were more, as David was saying earlier, about detail, check what the facts are. And if we read, now Paul, according to all the accounts, including the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Scriptures, the Gospel of Barnabas, identify Paul of Tarsus as the Antichrist, the man who falsifies the message. So
Right.
Paul, there's only one reliable statement in the entire Scripture and all the things relating to Paul, who says that about Hagar, because what they've got to do is you've got to discredit Hagar, the mother of Ishmael, and the covenant that would continue with him from Mount Sinai, which, by the way, is in Arabia. And Paul gives that clue about Hagar, being that this Mount Sinai, Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia. And that covenant that went on, was to go on till the day of judgment, was usurped by Paul and put onto Jesus, and so that was the diversion. So the falsification of Scripture, when the Prophet Muhammad came 600 or so years later, the poison had already been set. And so therefore, from that, the schismatic movement, the Crusade, and what we see today, Sunni and Shia, all those things happening, is all down to falsification of Scripture, although they can't falsify the Quran because we have the originals and the evidence that is absolutely patently clear.
And for those that aren't familiar with the Muslim faith, what is the difference between Sunni and Shia? What is the difference in belief?
Between the Itna Sharia, the people of the Sunni and the Shia who follow 12 Imams, it's identical in the Sunni madhab, and so there's no difference in the idea at all. It's but as Aleister Crowley, who you might recall was the black, he was the ultimate black magician. He was also part of MI5 with Alec Howe and others. He said, remember, the battle between Grand Lodge and the Vatican is not over content. It's purely over administration. Who is going to control the takings?
Right. Yeah.
So that the battle between now the other group, the Ismailis, who believe in 7 Imams, they are they're a group who were part of the assassins, and they basically are still betraying the true message, saying there's only 7 Imams, when all the evidence, as we'll see now, and at some point we'll be able to illustrate what's happening in Syria today and Iraq is all prophesied, and the prophecies that we have end in 1908. So those prophecies for our day were hidden for a long period after the fall of the Caliphate in 1908. The Ottoman Empire was by 70,000 Masonic Jews from Salonika coming and taking control of Constantinople.
Right.
And Constantinople, then Ataturk, Kemal Ataturk, all of this, the grouping were all of Jewish ancestry, but they were followers of Shabbat Zvi, who was a false messiah. So, but that when they got control of Turkey, all the prophecies and the stuff that we should have learnt about were kept under control.
Awesome.
And you have people like Nostradamus, and they plagiarized stuff from them. So, between the Sunni and the Shia, between those who follow the 12 Imams, I have probably the best book done by a Shia scholar showing that the 12 Imams, in fact, there are more Sunni hadith prophecies relating to the Mahdi who will only emerge after Iraq and Syria are destroyed. Now, before then, nothing could happen, but now we're in almost the phase of there'll be very little left of of Syria. There will be some left of Damascus, because the prophecies are the Mahdi, the 12th Imam, will join Jesus, Isa, in Damascus. And that is imminent within the next 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So all those prophecies have been hidden, but so we've been kept in the dark. But there's no difference between Sunni and Shia. Between the other groups, you'll find that they're all arguing over jurisdiction, who gets the money.
See.
And the Aga Khan's lot are probably the worst of all. They're part of the United Nations and the whole deception.
Well, the powers that be are definitely hell-bent on the destruction of Syria and Iraq. And how do you see things in Iran?
Well, Yemen also, because there are 3 groups that will rise. Now, the prophecies are absolutely clear. People are ordered not to go to Syria when the Malhama begins. They must stay in their place. The one laying down is better than the one sitting, the one sitting better than the one standing, and the one standing better than the one moving towards the conflict. Because if your intention is to go to Syria knowing that you will kill a Muslim, he comes to kill you. Now, whoever is killed, regardless of the event, both are in hellfire. So all these clowns that have got to join ISIS, which, remember, ISIS is Israeli secret intelligence service, and the clown that's running them, this al-Baghdadi, his name is Simon Elliott. He's an Israeli. And it's known that who they are, but all the leaders of most of these movements are Israeli stooges. They're plants to incite Muslims to do such stupid things.
So is the plan for a greater Israel?
Oh, no doubt. It's been the plan for many years. And Ben-Gurion's prophecy of 62 and all the things that we've now ready to expose, Balkanization of the Middle East is precisely what's wanted, greater Israel, from the Nile to the Euphrates, but also the Nile from down to Medina, because they know that the prophet that they're still waiting for has to rule from Medina.
Right.
So the fact they missed him the first time round, but this is also the vanity of people's vanity and idiocy, and they want to be like the Mahdi in Sudan. He had no claim, but he was egged on so we could go and send Gordon in to banjo them. This is the whole thing. Like Hamas was created by Israel.
Yes.
The leader of Hamas's son has become Christian. He's now blown the whistle. I don't know if you saw the interview with him on Channel 4, live on Channel 4 the day before yesterday. So you've got to look behind what the game is. So violence is totally against Islam. If you are faced by a ruler, a leader who is striping you back, do not rebel.
Right.
Don't rebel. But they've done it because they use this for football.
Yeah.
And these for thinking.
Yeah.
So the ISIS situation is created, and John McCain admitting, and we've got him on footage now,
Yes.
admitting that they armed ISIS, and this was 2013. He's there with al-Baghdadi in Syria. But the history of Britain and America, Pearl Harbor, was planned by the British in 1938 to get Japan to attack America to give them a pretext. How we won World War I, the Balfour Declaration in 1917 promised the German Jews Palestine.
Yeah.
The same book as I have republished, Propaganda of the Next War, is that we would get Japan to attack America. This is 1938, to bring America in on our side by promising the American Jews Palestine. And that's how we've done that. We've promised the things people want, and we've betrayed them, which is why the bad thing is that the Ismailis and those who have basically supported the British, we have been the greatest creators of fitna. We couldn't control the world from this little island unless we had Freemasonry and occult practices and intimidation, blackmail, as you'll see with the paedophiles and the pornography and all the things that have gone on. And a large proportion of the government and people in Parliament are blackmailed and held under that blackmail.
So any good scholar of the Quran will know what is going to happen and how it will.
Well, the
work out.
Quran tells us that just when they think that they are in control of everything, like Sodom and Gomorrah, like that, Noah's the flood, etc., and that is what's coming. The importance of the Quran, but it's also the prophecies, the hadith, and those hadith. Once you start to throw doubt, see, the key is why the Muslims became subservient to the British and the French and whoever came, is that these people created doubt about because we blinded them with their own science. I mean, that in a nutshell, that's what happened. So the hadith are critical. When you start to discredit them, as the Ismailis do, because once you accept them as truth, it discredits them. So the whole thing is that you need to have the full, unexpurgated versions of those, and you need to check them, as David was advising us over court cases. You have to meticulously check. Now, the criticism of Abu Huraira is that he couldn't possibly have learnt 5,000 hadith, but basically when you check what he's said, particularly about the fall of Constantinople, which happened in 1908, he said, now within 6 years, count 6 years to the Great War, Jihad Akbar, after 1 year the emergence of Antichrist, Dajjal, and revolution entering every Arab house, followed by mutual hatred and hostility between the Arabs. Abu Huraira, who they would willingly discard, there isn't anything. Now, July 1908, my book, the first book, was Satanic Voices, Ancient and Modern, and I had the accounts from the British Embassy. I went to the British Embassy. I checked the letters that came from Charles Harding to Sir Gerald Lowther, saying that the movement of the Young Turks, for Young Turks, he said, read Old Jews. And so the whole movement of the Young Turks were Jewish, but they were Kabbalistic Jews, atheists, Masonic people. So July 1908, British Embassy confirmed the revolution followed people coming and saying La ilaha illallah, and one of the defences, because Constantinople had 3 lines of defence.
Right.
The Masonic call sign was La ilaha illallah, and they were let in, and they were let in 3 times. Because the Sultan's troops had guns, but they had no ammunition, because the quartermasters had taken all live ammunition away from the Sultan's troops, so they entered and took control of it. That's how Constantinople fell, exactly according to the Hadith. Then he said, within 6 years of this event, count 6 years. So it brings us exactly to July 1914, and the pivotal issue was Archduke Ferdinand is assassinated in Sarajevo by a Masonic Jew who assassinates him to trigger the thing. Within 3 weeks, the Bank of England is basically ready to declare itself bankrupt. And so that was a key turning. So 1914 triggers off the Great War. Now, for 40 odd years I've fought with the Muslims because they say Kafirs can't call for a Jihad Akbar. But Abdul Hamid, who was under house arrest, the Caliph, the real Caliph, called for Jihad Akbar in favour of Germany, in favour of the Kaiser, because the Germans had actually built the Berlin to Baghdad railway so that they were not strangled by the British and the ownership of the Suez Canal.
Right.
Serbian national movement is established to prevent anything that didn't go through the Suez Canal. So this event is part of this whole sequence now. So it brings us to 1914. Then he says, after 1 year, so we missed 1915. As you see, history of the war times is no open revolt in Hijaz. Okay, 1916, June. Who arrives in June in Hijaz, Arabia? Lawrence, T.E. Lawrence. Lawrence then begins the first Arab Spring. And the Arabs do exactly what they've done the second time, idiots. They're ordered, don't fight the Turks, don't fight the Turks. don't fight the Turks. What did they do? Out of nationalism, bit of pride, I want to be so-and-so. They fought the Turks, blew up the bloody Hijaz railway, which had been built, and destroyed everything just out of vanity and stupidity. So Lawrence, and the other key is that those who say Allah has a son, Allah walada, Athanasius, Paul, all those who are polytheistic, they come with this same message. So Lawrence triggers off that. He betrays the Arabs, as he admits in 7 Pillars of Wisdom. He said it was an unfortunate situation to betray the Arabs, but it was necessary for a cheap and speedy victory over petroleum rights in Mesopotamia. So they betrayed them, and yet the Arabs have still now fallen for the same old trick. The second Arab Spring is now, look at Libya. Everywhere you go, but it's all down to result for disobedience and not learning from history. So the problems, but there will be, what's happening now, as they say about Syria and Iraq, all those who have faults, like the Alawites who worship Imam Ali as God, those and everything, the fact they've reverted to alcoholism and all those things that are forbidden under Sharia, same law, that's what's happening now. It's happened with the flood. It happened with, the clearing out of the Baghdad when the Mongols came. This is the last Mongol invasion, basically, and that then next will come the Mahdi out of Khorasan. Hence, the British have been in Afghanistan. They know he's coming out of there, and so when all else fails, read the instructions.
Yeah, exactly. So, would you think by 2024, 2025? The situation will have been settled and resolved, and
I think it will be before then, according to the numerology of the Quran. I mean, the Jews do know that after Israel was declared and the Temple Mount after 67, the prophecy is that within 48 years, Israel will be destroyed, and they will be destroyed because the Zionists should not have stepped foot in Palestine. Rothschild and all this encouraged them because they're Hizbul Shaitan. As soon as they went against the commandment, that was when the clock started ticking. So the Intifada begins, and this final phase now, according to the Hadith and the signs and the mathematics of the Quran, like the Bible Code, you find that the Bible Code predicted the death of Sadat exactly on the day by the people involved, and also the Israeli Prime Minister who was assassinated. So we have to go back and study these things, which are very clear, and so they're analytical tools. But it looks like 2015 would be the year of major changes, and by 2022 Israel will be destroyed, according to that.
Fine.
Inshallah.
Yes. Well, on that happy note, David, thank you very much, and I look forward to talking to you again about this subject. Thank you very much.